This episode of the Amateur Traveler podcast is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from the smart people at NerdWallet. From choosing the right travel card to dodging hidden fees, Smart Travel helps your money go further. Literally. They cover all things travel finance, including the smartest ways to book flights without playing the guess the cheapest day game, how to avoid paying for upgrades you won't use, when to book peak season trips without paying peak season prices, and how to maximize points for real savings, not just free bottled water. So they cover all the stuff we don't. And there's a reason for that. I don't know these subjects as well as the smart people at NerdWallet do. So if you're looking for information about financing your travels, check out Smart Travel. Travel smarter and spend less with the help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks to Smart Travel and NerdWallet for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Cooler days call for layers that last, and Quince is your go-to for quality essentials that feel cozy, look refined, and won't blow your budget. You've heard what I like at Quince, but I've talked to friends. Mignon really loves the ladies' linen pants that even have pockets. And Gary also recommends some of the bedding, which I haven't tried yet. Think about their $50 cashmere sweater, premium denim that fits like a dream, and luxe outerwear that you wear year after year. These are the pieces that'll turn into your fall uniform. Because Quince partners directly with top-tier ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen, they deliver luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. What Quince pieces have become staples in your fall wardrobe? Let me know. Quince has really become a one-stop shop. Are there a few pieces you've been reaching for lately, whether it's your closet, kitchen, or around the house? Find your fall staples at Quince. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 965. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about bookstores and galleries, catacombs and pyramids, mosques and mummies as we go to Cairo, Egypt. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Cairo. I would like to welcome to the show Neil Laird, TV producer and the author of the Primetime Travelers series. You can find him at neillaird.com. And Neil has come to talk to us about Cairo, Egypt. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
What is your connection with Cairo, Egypt, first of all?
I've traveled to some 70 countries and I've been a TV producer for 30 years. But anytime people ask me, what is my happy place? What is the place that set me all off on this journey? It is Egypt. I've been enamored and fascinated by the ancient Egyptians and by the culture there for 30, 35 years. And Cairo, of course, is the gateway to that. I spent a lot of time in Luxor shooting films for National Geographic and Discovery Channel, BBC. But Cairo is often overlooked because it's the noisy, chaotic city that you come into before you go see Luxor and the great ruins. And that's a shame because Cairo is a universe unto itself. So I've always been a big touter of all things Cairo because people often dismiss it out of hand.
It's interesting you managed to use the word tout and Cairo in the same sentence. That may come up again.
Many times.
And Cairo being such an easy city to navigate. I think you may have just answered my question about why should somebody go to Cairo. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think as we talk about the itinerary, more things will come up. But Cairo is one of those towns that I think intimidates people because it's 23 million people, the largest city in Africa. It is undoubtedly chaotic and polluted and noisy. And the touts, there it is again, is a place that saturates the senses. And I think it's a town that you need a few days in to really truly start to appreciate it and peel it back. So anyone who has a chance to spend a week there, as we'll talk about, will see a completely different Egypt and a completely different Cairo than those who just zip through on a big tour bus. Anything I can do to inspire people to slow down a bit and see the capital of Egypt is time well spent.
I was referencing before we started recording to my entry into Egypt where we showed up at the Cairo airport confused about how to get the visa that you get on arrival, and then also somebody came up to us and said, "Do you want a cab?" And I said yes, and he walked off with our luggage into the night at 1 a.m. And my wife questioned my judgment whether this was a good idea. So Cairo can be intimidating, and I had some experiences with that. But what itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
There's so much to see there. Now, obviously, you have to see the big sites like the
Yeah,
pyramids, of course. And a lot of people see the pyramids in a day or two and then head out to go see the museum, the pyramids. And I
sure.
really think that if you slow down, you recognize there's a lot more archaeological ruins there. And we can go through a day by day itinerary. But certainly starting in Giza and seeing the pyramid is a must, whether
Sure.
it's a week or whether you're on to somewhere else, because the pyramids are just gobsmackingly beautiful.
Now, are you going to recommend we stay out by Giza, or are we going to?
No, I think I whipped up a little itinerary. And the key thing about Cairo, as I've already said, is it is an intense city. It is not necessarily for the
Yeah.
faint of heart, merely because it is noisy at all times. Traffic is terrifying. It is polluted. People yelling and shouting, and it can be intimidating for those people who don't recognize that it's really actually a quite safe city. It's just a noisy, loud, in-your-face, aggressive city. I'd be much more comfortable walking around Cairo at 2 in the morning than I would my own borough of Brooklyn. So there's that. But the area people should stay in is an island actually in the middle of the Nile,
Okay.
separating the two sections called Zamalek. And everyone should spend at least a day there. And that's Zamalek is the most lush and probably the most sedate part of Cairo because it doesn't have all the use motorways. Because it's an island, it's a little quieter. We got the Nile on both sides, a lot of places you can sit. And it's almost European. And I don't want to say that that's a
Hmm.
good thing, that you don't want to go to Egypt and see Europe. But what I mean is you can stroll around. It's a good way to acclimate yourself. What it has is a lot of art galleries. It has the great coffee shops. There's some great galleries and handicraft places that you can buy. One called Fair Trade for handicrafts, another one called Nomad Gallery. And they're both great places if you want to go in and buy some real authentic Egyptian artwork and not have to haggle and go through all that process. In that way, it's a great way to spend a day or two before you plunge into the real Cairo.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about Zamalek in terms of where we should stay, which little coffee shop we should go?
I would say more and more, I would recommend people use Airbnbs in Egypt
Okay. Interesting.
because the hotel situation there is such where the small boutique hotels have disappeared in a way where I've talked to someone in the industry over there in the hotel industry and they say it doesn't pay to have a 2 star, 3 star hotel when you can put a 5 star hotel for the same cost. So everybody's
Ah,
making the big mega hotels. And you have them. You have the Ramsey Hilton in here Square. Even in Zamalek, you have the Marriott and the St. Regis, which are really beautiful, big 5 star hotels. I would recommend those if you want comfort. But there's a lot of smaller places outside of the Airbnbs, which I always stay in. One called Houseboat 65, which is a charming little boutique right on the river. And you can get in there and you can actually sail across the Nile instead of go up and cross the bridge. There's another one called Villa Bella. It's on a very far tip of the island, and it's in a little garden, and it's lovely, and it's very well appointed with pine trees and palm trees and olive trees, and you can hide in the shade and have your coffee there. And one thing to keep in mind too is Egypt is ever changing, and in the 35 years that I've been going there, when I first started, you could barely get an alcoholic drink because it's a very Muslim country. So, of course,
sure.
they also recognize that when you come from London or New York or LA or whatever, you're going to want a good cocktail. So, Zamalek is one of those places where you can find a bar anywhere. It really does cater to the Western tastes. There's a really wonderful place called Five Bells, and it's a great restaurant, again, on the far end of Zamalek. You can sit outside, it's got really good all the classic Middle Eastern dishes. And then at midnight, the belly dancers come out. And what's interesting about belly dancers is people think it's just for the tourists, but actually the Egyptians love their belly dancers. It's a very serious artistic pursuit for a lot of women. It's really treated with respect. So if you want to see the best belly dancers, you go to Zamalek as well. And a place called Five Bells will show you that.
Excellent. Anything else about Zamalek? And then, if not, I want to move on to Giza, Gaza.
No, I think that's a good day, first day to acclimate yourself, come down from your jet lag. Because if you're coming from New York or the US, it's going to be at least a 10-hour flight. So you'll definitely want a day to sort of like chill before you plunge in.
Excellent. And then are you recommending we get a guide to go to Giza or for any of this portion or?
Any of the guides are plentiful there. And I don't want to recommend any one because they change so often. I would say, oh, talk to Saeed. And then we find out Saeed is retired yesterday or yeah, that kind of thing. So any hotel you go to will help you with guides. And most of them
Okay.
legitimate because any ones that go through the hotels like the Marriott and that kind of stuff, they will have to get a badge from the tourism bureau to work it. They've already been vetted a bit. Be wary of anybody that comes up on the street and offers you
Yeah.
a cab or offers you special. I can show you behind the scenes, or they're lying, but that happens anywhere. So
So you're saying when you're in the airport and someone comes up and says, I can get you a cab, you shouldn't do that. You're
I
saying,
would never do that. I've never met anybody that stupid. I can't imagine anyone would fall for that.
yeah, that's what my wife thought. So
Yeah, right. It's not going to throw a bone of contention. Hey, it worked, right? You got to ride into the city.
my instincts worked out okay. But no, I wouldn't probably do that again.
Actually, here's the key thing about Egypt, and same with India and all these places that often do feel intimidating with the touts and with the aggressive, in-your-face sellers is why they will rip you off by selling you something that's cheap for far more expensive. They won't steal from you. They're not thieves. It's not like the gypsies in
Yeah.
Roma or places like that, that their goal is to extract stuff from you without any kind of payment. Here, they will simply lie about this provenance. This is a piece that came from King Tut's tomb. And then, of course, you flip it over and it says made in China. They have no compunction about lying that way, but they won't steal your luggage.
No, no.
So
The other thing that, in terms of negotiating, our guide for the trip, the amateur traveler trip, actually, that we did in Egypt, always said if you are finished negotiating and the person you're talking to is smiling, then you could have gotten it for less.
we should talk about haggling. It's
Personally, I may still stop haggling when the guy is smiling, but you know that when they're not smiling anymore, you probably got the rock bottom price.
two things to know about haggling, and it is very intimidating. And certainly, I was that way on my first trip to the Middle East too. Is one, you have to recognize that it is how they sell things. It is part of the process. So
Yeah.
don't feel like you're offending somebody by cutting it in half. That's what you're supposed to do. That is the haggling process. You are supposed to come in really low and meet in the middle somewhere. So it's fun. You have to enjoy and recognize, oh, at the end of the day, no one's being harmed. I can walk away. I don't owe this guy anything. And the other thing I always tell people is, even if you spend too much for that carpet or that papyrus, when you come home and hang on your wall, in a year from now, you're going to forget how much you paid anyways. So even if you got ripped off in terms of paying too much, do you really care a year later that you paid an extra $32
Yeah.
for it? So you have to have fun with it. You got to let go with the haggling, recognizing that it's simply cultural and that is how it's done, and no one gets hurt at the end of the day.
And I always figure that when I get to the last few dollars, those dollars mean more to them than they do to me
They
usually.
do,
So I
and
don't
it's
worry
tough
too much
times
about
over
it.
there. It's tough
Yeah.
times over there. Tipping is the other big thing. Baksheesh is very much a cultural thing. You should always carry small bills, Egyptian pounds, with you because they open the door, they help you with your luggage. They are making piasters, which is pennies a day, and they live for those extra 2 or 3 pounds. Now, keep in
Yeah.
mind the exchange rate is so bad. I wrote it down up here because it changes so much. What is it now? As of today, 50 Egyptian pounds is $1. So an Uber from the airport will cost you about $8, and it's an hour trip. They
Wow.
have a very
Okay.
devalued currency. So all of those little extra dollars that you might want to haggle over, let it go. You really are putting food on the table.
So you recommended we are off to Giza next. What are we going to do in Giza? Because
I
that
mean,
has
Giza,
changed since I was there.
they've done a lot of great work over there. They really have put a lot of effort into cleaning it up and making it much more user friendly for people. But everybody goes to Giza to see the Great Pyramids.
Yep.
And of course, the Great Pyramid of Khufu is the massive one on top of the hill. And there's three of them together, of course.
Yep.
When you get there, you realize that they all look the same size, but you realize that one's much larger because the other two literally on even bigger hills. At some point, one is always open for tourists. Never all three. So I would recommend you get out there early in the morning to beat the crowds and then see as many of them as you can. Usually two are open. There's Menkaure and then there's Sneferu too, those two tombs. And each pyramid is different in terms of how you go in and what you can see. You don't need a guide for it. You can do it yourself. You pay your ticket for one or two pyramids, whatever's opened, and then you go through there. Each one takes about an hour, a half hour. So you want to give yourself some time. Now, if you're
And when you
claustrophobic,
say go through there, we're going into the pyramid.
it is the pyramids were essentially built in the Old Kingdom as tombs. There's no question
Yep.
about that. And as a TV producer, I've made shows. They say it wasn't made by aliens, wasn't made by levitation. No, it was made by really and brilliant engineers. And they were
And
tombs
a lot
for
of slave labor.
yes, a lot of people who would rather be back growing sugar
Yeah,
cane than moving these tons of bricks along. Whether they were slave or they were
that's true.
conscripted, that we'll leave that to the Egyptologists. But it's clearly these people had a hard life moving these bloody blocks around. And they really were just delusions of grandeur by these old kingdom pharaohs who wanted to take it with them. So they all had sarcophagi with their bodies inside and whatever else, jewels and things
Right.
they wanted to take. And they had secret passageways to get in there, and they would have trap doors with boulders, and none of them succeeded. And all of them have been robbed in antiquity. But what's
Yeah.
left behind, of course, is the passageways either made by the tomb robbers or by the actual Egyptians. And these are the ones that you can crawl into and go see the burial chamber, the king's chamber, and see exactly what it's like in the middle of the pyramid.
Again, not for the claustrophobic. I think you started to say.
Yeah, it's not for the claustrophobic, and of course, you recognize you're going straight down deep into it. So, look, it's safe. They have guardrails and things. It's not like you're an Indiana Jones going into the jungle and pushing aside 6-foot spiders and evil people with blowtorches. It's not that kind of stuff. No Nazis are in there. But it is slow going. So you give yourself time. If you're going to see two, which I recommend, you can easily spend a day at Giza. Because on top of, beyond Giza, you have the Great Sphinx, which is
Sure.
attached to the Great Pyramid. And there's a nice, cool temple you can walk through there, and then you can walk up along the Sphinx, and you can see it really up close, which is really a treat. And then there's also one other thing that everyone should do there is there's actually when they discovered the Sphinx temple, they also found a huge pit and it had a solar boat in it from 4,500 years ago, which was a ceremonial boat so the pharaoh could take the duat, take the underworld to the 12 gates in the evening and sail. And the boat was never used and it was in perfect shape. And when they found it 4,500 years later, it was still pristine. So you see this amazing ship that's in its own little enclosure that the wood has not rotted because it was perfectly buried in the sand. And you're looking exactly at what it looked like in the pharaoh's eyes almost 5 millennia ago.
Now, is that going to be in the Grand Egyptian Museum, or where is that?
They've been talking about moving it, but right now they just built a new enclosure for it. It used to be this big, ugly. I mean, I guess you were there probably if you went to Cairo. You remember this kind of big, ugly brick building
I
that
don't
really kind of
remember the
stood out.
boat.
Oh, really? It's right in
Yeah.
front of I think Menkare's pyramid. But yeah, it's sort of an eyesore. So they made it a little more germane to the tombs and temples that they use sandstone. But the Grand Egyptian Museum is the big question mark for everybody because that is $1 billion museum, the largest and most expensive ever made. It still hasn't opened as of our conversation in July of 25 for various things from bureaucracy to incompetence to uncertainty. There's so much money wrapped up into it. The Middle East is always a powder keg. It's been shut down again because of Israel and Iran right now. So I've been there because I shot a film there and they invited journalists to go in and talk it up. But it is it's a jaw-droppingly beautiful museum. And it's right on the edge of the Giza Plateau. So one side is all glass and you look out and you see the three pyramids and you see the Sphinx and you are right there. King Tut was the only pharaoh ever found intact with all his jewelry and everything. And there's so much in that tiny tomb that they found in 1922 that's never been fully displayed. The old museum in
Sure.
Tahrir Square just didn't have the room. So now when you go to the Grand Egyptian Museum, you see everything. Stuff that has been in storage for over 100 years. And that is splendiferous to see because it is just this gorgeous artwork. So it's
Right.
possible they'll move the solar boat there as well because that's going to be the one-stop shop for everything and they can take care of it better. It's climate controlled. But as of now, I think it's going to stay put.
Okay. And we're talking about you mentioned the Old Kingdom. So we're talking 2500, 2600 BC when
Correct.
these were built. I remember our tour guide blew my mind when he said that we don't know much about the sea peoples that helped cause the fall of the Old Kingdom, but he said they had an unfair advantage because they had the wheel, because they had chariots. And you're standing here in front of this big pyramid going, excuse me?
They did not have the wheel when they made the Great Pyramids in 4,500 years ago. Yeah. No, what they did have is they had rollers and stuff. They had half
Yeah.
wheels and they could move things along. But yeah, it was actually the Hyksos that brought the chariot. before the sea people, but it's close enough. Your guide wasn't too far off. But they did this all, and that's another reason why so many crackpots have think that they had help from aliens and things. And it's right there. You can go there. You can see graffiti saying "Gang 6 built this." But it boggles our mind because we can't imagine somebody would take the time to build this. But it's clearly
Yep.
as human engineering. And yeah, we in the TV business call those who don't believe that pyramidians.
We call them other things sometimes too.
Yeah, it's a family show.
Anything else for Giza, or where are we moving on from there?
No, I think that's a full day. I know you talked about any things to avoid touristy. There's this really god awful thing called the Sound and Light Show or Sound and Vision Show or something, where at nighttime they light up the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. And that looks nice, but then they have these really cheesy actors. I am Kefren. I will build a pyramid. And it's like something out of a really bad Charlton Heston film, 1956. I would avoid that and just go get a nice lunch back in Zamalek. Nice dinner, I mean. So that's a full day right there.
Where to next?
One place very few people spend time, and it's a shame, is downtown Cairo itself.
Okay.
Because it is noisy and chaotic, as I keep saying, and it's got Tahrir Square, where, of course, is the main area where the Arab Spring took place. It is where business takes place in Egypt, and people don't see the exotic pharaonic trappings. They don't spend time there. But downtown Cairo was the epicenter of the actual city for centuries and centuries. Much of it was built in the 17th, 18th century by the French or the British, so it has a lot of colonial throwback, but it also has these very classic alleyways that you can sneak back into. And you have to look for them. You have to have patience because it might be off a very busy, noisy thoroughfare. But then you walk by this twisting street, and there's this wonderful cafe called Cafe Riche, Riche. And it has been there since the 1700s, and it looks it. It's got this classic arabesque design. And it's where one of my favorite writers, Naguib Mahfouz, wrote all his novels. And if anyone doesn't know who Naguib Mahfouz is, I recommend before you take the trip, go buy one of his books. He's a novelist. He died about 10 years ago, but he was most prolific probably in the 50s and 60s. And he's a wonderful trilogy called the Cairo Trilogy, Palace Walk and Palace of Desire and Sugar Street. And it's all about a family from about 1900 to the 60s living in Cairo. And it all takes place in these back alleys. So definitely take some time and look out for Cafe Riche. It's a great place to start your day. And then right across the street, there's a great bookstore, the AUC, the American University of Cairo bookstore. And they have a bunch of titles in English, and that's where you can get all the Egyptology books you want, all the maps, anything you want. Stuff that is not published here about Egypt, you will find there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you walk around downtown Cairo, then you'll come across all these great galleries. There's one called the Mashrabia Gallery, Mashrabia. And it has a lot of modern, contemporary Egyptian work, which is great. Another one called Access Art Space. And so you really realize that Egypt is very much a modern place, too. It has some great artists. This is where the backpackers will go. So you'll see the younger set there because there's hostels are there. So it's a place that doesn't make the Frommer's guidebooks, I think, because people were so anxious to get to the stuff and even have Frommer's anymore. But it's a place you definitely want to spend a day. And that's where you really get to know the real Cairo of today. And then you can end your day by walking over one of the Nile bridges from the Tahrir Square past the Cairo Opera House where Kulthum sang in the 1920s. And you can look down and you can see all the boats going over and you can walk back to Zamalek.
And yes, they still do have Frommer's guidebooks. Pauline's even been on the show.
Okay, all right. I used to write for them way back in the day, but that was 25 years ago. So I don't think she'd remember me. Yes, that's a full day. And then I would say you could also do the Grand Egyptian Museum that day, but I don't know when it's going to open. That's back over by the pyramids. I wouldn't recommend you doing the gem and the pyramids in the same day because you'd just be exhausted. The gem is so huge. That's its own beast that you would spend extra time at.
And they have closed the one that was on Tahrir Square.
I haven't been back since 21, I guess, 22. And they still had some stuff there, like the King Tut stuff. But they've since moved that because of the grand opening. So I don't know what's left. It's a shell of a building, I imagine. It's a shame because I always loved the Cairo Museum. It's got that old crumbling, moldering,
had a grandma's attic sort of look to it.
Yeah. So I will miss it. Now, all the bureaucracy of shooting there over the years and talking to people to try to get back there and all that stuff. I don't miss that. I think things are much smoother now. But I will miss the time-worn nature of it.
That's a nice way of saying that.
Yes. Everything about Egypt is time-worn. So the next day, I would say another something that the tourists always do see is Islamic Cairo.
Yeah.
And when people talk about Islamic Cairo in the guidebooks, they'll talk about two things. They'll talk about the Muhammad Ali Mosque up on the
Yeah.
Citadel, and they'll talk about Khan Khalili, both of which are lovely, but they're a very small slice of Islamic Cairo. Islamic Cairo was that medieval era from maybe 1200 to maybe before the Brits and the French started showing up. And unfortunately, a lot of it's falling apart until recently because they just don't have the money to restore that and the pharaonic stuff. They finally started to restore some of these older buildings and old mosques that you can walk into. Mosques are all free. And people should take the time. They shouldn't be intimidated by going into mosques. And the Muhammad Ali Mosque is one. There's the Kahim Mosque, which is fantastic, and the Al Azhar Mosque. There are all these gorgeous medieval mosques, huge with the soaring minarets, and they're free to go into. The only caveats are don't go into when there's service taking place, particularly on a
Yeah.
Friday. And like for all of Egypt, dress conservatively.
Yeah.
Don't dress in short shorts and don't wear your bikini from the Red Sea. People have done it. And it's no insulting. If you're a woman and you walk into the mosque, just put a headscarf on, wear long sleeves. It's a show of respect. They won't say anything if you don't. They'll be offended. And obviously take your shoes off when you go in. But there's 4 or 5 gorgeous mosques near Khan Khalili in Islamic Cairo. And I will preface this by saying I would recommend everybody to do an Islamic Cairo. You can walk through the area. But it is an assault where you will see the real Egypt. You will see the poverty. You will see the trash. It's bisected by very noisy roads that are sometimes very hard to get across because it never seems to let up. So again, that is not for the faint of heart. It is not an easy walk in terms of a stroll through a park, but you will really see 500 years of history and how they all collide together. And you'll find these back alleys where you can buy some cool stuff or just get lost and you feel like you're in some medieval Islamic world. It's just wonderfully transporting, but it does take a bit of
Now,
guts.
are there any walking tours you would recommend that would make that a little more accessible to the fainter of heart?
I don't have a map in front of me to do it because it really is a question of just where you start. It's huge. It's a huge section. But
Yeah.
again, I would say the key things you want to see are there's a street called Al Muzzi. I can never really say my Arabic. It's Almuizz Street. It's a pedestrian street packed with medieval architecture. So do a beeline for that. And if you can find that street, then all the mosques like the Al Hakim, Hikim, and the Al Azhar, Azhur. These are these mosques along there. And you'll see signs for it. So make your way to that street, and then all the great stuff will be off it.
Okay, cool.
And then clearly a traditional market where all the tourists do go. And it's worth it, but you'll be careful. You got to really haggle hard because they know the tourists come there and they will sell something really cheap at exorbitant rates. So the rule of thumb is if they say 100, never go over half of that. Say 50 and be prepared to walk away. Smile. Never get angry, never get rude, but know that their first offer will be outrageous, particularly in Khalili, because they know you're not coming back tomorrow. So they've got nothing to lose. You meet in the middle, you say 100, you say 50. If you land around 60, 65, you've done well.
And I enjoyed just seeing it. Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't tend to be a buyer of that many souvenirs anyway, but I love a good market, and that one is memorable.
Yeah. And it's fun to buy stuff. Again, there's some really cool jewelry boxes, and
Yeah.
you can see them make the jewelry right for you. Take your time and go through. People love to show you the artisans at work. They'll bring you tea. You'll sit and you can drink the tea. Don't drink the water. Don't ever drink the water out of the tap. You can drink bottled water. You can drink the tea because it's boiled. And invariably, when you're haggling, someone will show up in the cute little tea cups, the tulip-shaped teacups. Drink it. It's a way to get to know the person. Sit down on the mat and talk a bit, and you will get to know a bit about their lives. Now, they're trying to sell something, but it's a wonderful way to get to see how people deal with each other beyond just a tourist, just by slowing down and taking 15 minutes to have tea with somebody. Yeah, and you don't have to buy. At the end of the day, if you don't like the carpet or whatever, they're not going to be offended if you get up and you leave. You owe them
Excellent.
nothing. I would say do a day trip if you got a whole week and go see Alexandria. Alexandria is the second
Interesting.
biggest
Okay.
city in Egypt.
hmm
And people often ignore it because all the great stuff, the pharaonic stuff, is down south. And
Right.
Alexandria is the city on the Mediterranean up north. And it has a different vibe. Although, of course, it goes back to Cleopatra and Alexander the Great's day. It really has a much more European. It was built by the same architects who built Paris. It's got that kind of fanning out feel. So it has a totally different vibe. And because it's a seaside town, there's great beaches there, the Mediterranean, great fish restaurants. It just feels different than Cairo. You see a different city in Egypt, and you recognize that Cairo is its own beast. Because although Alexandria still has 4 or 5 million people or something, it feels much more sedate. It's 2 hours ride straight from there. You get an Uber will take you there. It'll all be fixed price, and they'll pick you up and take you back. So it'll be 2 hours coming back. But it's really worth the day trip because you'll get up there and there's a great fort called the Fort Quebe, which is where the
Yep.
lighthouse used to be, one of the seven wonders. And there's a great catacombs there, these Greco-Roman catacombs called,
Oh, I don't know about the catacombs.
yeah, it's really cool. They go down right underneath the city, and they're mostly Roman, and they're always looking for where Alexander the Great was buried. It's too late for him, but you'll see these great Roman statues carved. And I've been in television for 25, 30 years or maybe longer, I don't know. And I've done probably 7 or 8 shows about where Alexander the Great's tomb. People are always looking for that tomb. They're
It's
not gonna
supposed to be
find an Alexander.
somewhere in Alexandria.
They say that, or the Siwa Oasis, which is where he went out
Yep.
to become a god. I've been to all those places. I think he was probably robbed 6 weeks after he was buried there, probably by the very people who buried him. So you're probably not going to find it, but it's a great story. But there's a new beach town. I have never been there, but if you're more well-heeled travelers and want to see what like all the Gulf billionaires and millionaires and how they live, they tend to come to Egypt because it's a little less conservative than the other Gulf states. And there's a brand new town called Sokna. It's what Sokhna. It's a beach. And you can go, you don't have to stay there, but you can go there and you can swim the ocean and it's really gorgeous and clean. And it's got that almost Dubai feel to it. So if you're curious about seeing how the other half live in the Middle East, spend a few hours swimming there. And then
Okay.
there's great seafood. There's a place called Zephyrine, which is right near the lighthouse. Zephyrion. I always go there. And you can look out over the pier and you can pick the fish you want and it's super fresh. So that's a great way to end it. And then get your Uber to drive you back to Cairo.
Okay.
And then the next day is probably my favorite place in all of Cairo. And I love ancient history. That's my thing. I've written my book, Primetime Travelers, takes place in ancient Egypt. And I've done so many shows on it. I've been to Egypt making films about the ruins for so long. But my favorite place in all of Egypt for the ruins is actually not the Valley of the Kings. It's Saqqara and Dashur. And I don't know if you got to
Huh.
Saqqara when you were there.
No.
Saqqara is the pyramid field. So the Giza is just one of the pyramid fields along the west bank of the Nile. And the
Right.
pharaohs always buried all the dead, all the catacombs and the necropolises were built on the west side. That's where the sun set. That's where you die.
Right.
The sun rises in the east, that's life, and then it disappears in the west. And that's where all the tombs are. So all the pyramids are on that side. Now the Nile has shifted its course so far. It's no longer along the Nile. It's like 10 kilometers away from the Nile now because it's been 4,000 years. But the original pyramids were built in Saqqara, which is about 15, 20 miles. It's about 30 to 40 minutes to get there because it's bumper to bumper traffic on a very small road, which is gorgeous, past little villages and underneath palm trees and things. And Saqqara has the very famous step pyramid, which people have probably
Yeah.
seen. It's the very first pyramid ever built by Zoser, the same guy who built the Great Pyramid. And they were trying things out there. So you see all these failed pyramids down there. You'll see the bent pyramid where they got halfway up and they realized, holy shit, the angles are all wrong. So they changed the angles dramatically. They threw that one away. Then they built the step pyramid. And then they built the red pyramid. And you can go into all these things. And you always have them to yourself. Nobody goes to Saqqara because I think people see the one big thing and then they fly down to Luxor. And it's a shame
Right.
because Saqqara, to me, is much more transporting, partially because a lot less people go there.
And this is also, again, Old Kingdom, where Luxor is going to be Middle Kingdom.
It's all Old Kingdom. All this is Old Kingdom, yeah. Now, some of
Middle.
the new kingdoms came back and built some temples and things on top of it
Oh,
when they were
interesting.
getting
Okay.
nostalgic for good times. You remember, Egypt is so old that
Right.
more time separates Ramsey from Cleopatra than Cleopatra to us.
Yes.
So there's that great expanse. So after a while, they said, oh, I want to go back to the great days of the pharaohs. And they would go up and they would gussy up some old tomb and pyramid in the new kingdom and say it was theirs. But most of the great stuff is Old Kingdom. And I think two of my favorite sites and all of ancient archaeology are there, both of which have appeared in my books. There's one called The Tomb of the Brothers. And I'm gay, so all my books deal with gay and lesbians and ancient history too. And I talk a lot
Uh-huh.
about the Tomb of the Brothers because it wasn't found until 1964 and on the necropolis, right in the shadow of the step pyramid.
Uh-huh.
And they called it the Tomb of the Brothers at the time because it looked like two brothers were buried there. But clearly, when you walk through it, it's two same sex men who were buried together. And they have all these images of them holding hands, touching nose to nose, which is the ancient Egyptian form of kissing. It is a lovely, beautiful tomb of just these two men that obviously loved each other and spent eternity together. And they worked for the pharaoh. And I use that as an example in my talks, talking about how sometimes history doesn't always march forward with progress, because you have to recognize that these guys wouldn't have been buried there if the pharaoh didn't sanction it. So
Right. Yeah.
clearly, same-sex unions were okay 4,500 years ago for these two guys to be buried there. And the fact that it's called Tomb of the Brothers shows that homophobia was much stronger in 1964 than it was in 4000 BC. So it's a
Uh,
great eye opener in recognizing that we always don't get more enlightened as time goes on. And that's a beautiful place, and it's always open. There's beautiful frescoes. And then the strangest place I've ever seen in all of Egypt is a thing called the Serapeum. And this is New Kingdom. This is actually Ptolemaic. So it's after New
oh
Kingdom.
wow.
Yeah, and so it's late during the time when Alexandria was the capital and post Alexander. And Serapeum is a labyrinth found totally underground. You won't see anything from the ground except for a door that goes down. And then you go in, and there's a labyrinth of all of these enormous sarcophagi that are all the size of two king-size beds stacked on top of one another, far bigger than a human. And there must be dozens and dozens of them, totally unadorned. And
Huh.
they built one after the other for several hundred years. You open them up, and what you find is mummified Apis bulls. So the
Huh.
Ptolemaics worship bulls, and that was a sign of God. They would find the one bull that had the right spot on the side, the white bull with a black spot or whatever it was, and that would become the god. And they would worship this bull, and then when it died, they would mummify it and put it in this tomb in this Serapeum, then go find another one. And this happened for 300 years. And it was totally forgotten about. There's no writing down, there's no jewels or anything. It is just where they preserve their bulls. It is one of the strangest, most bizarre places I've ever seen. You wouldn't think something like that would
Huh.
exist on planet Earth. And nobody goes there. And it's a place, once again, you'll be there with very few people. And once you pay your admission, you can see anything at Saqqara. And it is a must. It is a must sight to see.
I've not heard of this. This is interesting.
Yeah. Got to go back. And then I think, and then up to day 7, there's one last day. You could do two things. You can either go back to the Grand Museum, the Grand Egyptian Museum, because again, with all that stuff, when it does open, you'll want to spend 7 hours there. Air conditioned. It's got a great restaurant, got amazing views. It is so comfortable, so modern that it's not a museum you're going to zip into and zip out of. You want to slow down and see it all. But another day trip that many people don't take, and I just took it for the first time myself on one of my more recent trips 2 or 3 years ago, go out to the Fayoum Oasis. And the Fayoum is the nearest oasis to Egypt. And you keep in mind, once you leave Cairo, you're in the Sahara Desert. There's nothing out there. You hit Libya, and until you get to the other coast, it's just the Sahara. But there's little pockets of oasis. And the Fayoum Oasis is also pharaonic, and they have some really cool ruins out there. But they also have a little village called Tunis. And it's where the pottery has been made for thousands of years. And now you have these
Hmm.
pottery workshops, and you can go in there and you can make your own pot, and you can work with the local artisans, and it all comes back to the local people. So you can go out there and you can just wander around and then come back with the pot you made or one you picked. And there's also got this very strange site a couple of miles out of there called the Valley of the Whales. Have you ever heard of this place?
No.
It is a open stretch of the Sahara Desert full of whale bones, enormous whale bones, like the size of blue whales and stuff, which should not be in the desert, right? But tens of thousands of years ago, the Sahara was an ocean. And so they started finding all these whale bones and shark bones out in the desert, and they're enormous. And they're tens of thousands of years old, and so a lot of these are extinct species. So you go out there and you park and you walk around the desert, you see these very strange shaped stones from the wind too, and then you walk around and you see all these enormous whale bones. And it's just a weird, surreal way to end a trip because you never really thought that you would go to Egypt to see a blue whale.
Huh. And it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yeah. And it's really well taken care of out there. And it's not something that I would say make it day one, but if we're looking for us to get out and really see something totally unique, then you'll never forget it because these things are enormous and there's dozens of them. And it's a beautiful place to walk around and there's little cafes you can tap into and beat the heat. So if you're very
Interesting.
adventurous, go to the Fayoum.
Now, I obviously constrained you to 1 week, which I do to all our guests,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. You had to choose some things. If you had an extra day, what would you have added in?
Ooh, let's see.
Or what did you just decide to skip, period, because you don't think it's worth it?
I mean, there's a whole area up top, and for me, I have a lot of friends who love up called the Mokama Hills. I have to write it down so you look at it. It's up above the Citadel, and that's the New Cairo. So I have a lot of friends
Okay.
who are filmmakers, artists, and they live up there. And if you want to get away from all the trappings down below, it's a great way to go up and see what almost looks like a city in New York and LA with a city in the States or Europe or whatever, but with an Egyptian touch. And friends up there who are Egyptian, their daughter doesn't speak any Arabic. So it's almost a world away. She's going to an
Huh.
American school and she's learning it. And then what they have up there is along the hills, the cliffs. And if you're in Egypt, you go east beyond the Citadel and you'll see these sheer cliffs. They're impossible to miss, even from downtown Cairo. And you go up there, and up there is where you get all the nightclubs and you get all the bars and all the fancy places. So if you're looking for
Okay.
nightlife, if you're younger and you want to see where the young Egyptians hang out, you go to the cliffs. And that's where you also get the quote unquote dirty belly dancers. The belly dancers come on at midnight, and then about 4 a.m., the dirty belly dancers come out. So you can imagine where that goes. So it's a place you party until you're still 7 a.m. So if you're looking for that kind of Cairo, that's where you head.
Okay. Now, you skipped Coptic Cairo intentionally or not?
It's lumped in with Islamic Cairo. It's very
Okay.
small. I think it'd be on that Islamic day because you're right there. You
Okay.
can see the hanging church, and there's a synagogue there. Now, they're worth seeing. I think I only did it because there was so much stuff to see in that area, and I just love walking down the Islamic section. But yeah, when
Okay.
you're there, you can very easily dip into it. It'll all be on that same little path. And the hanging church is one of the earliest churches, and the synagogue, again, is one of the earliest synagogues. There's very little Christian or Jewish followers left in Egypt because of all the stuff that's happened over the last couple hundred years. But these are well preserved, and they're worth a peek, yeah.
Okay. Anything else we should add before we get to some of our wrap up questions?
No, I think it just Cairo. You need patience. You need to take a deep breath, and you'll recognize you're not at home anymore. You're not in Kansas, Dorothy. You're very much in somebody else's backyard. So you can't get frustrated by the heat, by the noise, by the touts, by the service at a restaurant. You have to leave from those expectations at home. And you do that, and it's just a city of just a great discoveries. But it's a place you need to go slow, even though it's a very fast-paced city. You have to take a deep breath for Cairo. And when at the end of the week, if you take this itinerary, you have a totally different understanding of what Egypt is than if you just go and you see the Felucca tour and you see the ruins. Because that's wonderful, and I love that stuff. But that's a museum. This is the living city.
Excellent. You mentioned the heat. When do you recommend we go to Cairo? And when do you recommend we avoid?
Clearly, July and August, which I've been many times, they're hot as hell. They're really hard, particularly down in Luxor when you go further south. But even
Yep.
Cairo can get pretty steamy. The best time is the fall, October, November, and then the early spring, February and March. Then it starts to get pretty hot. That's all my archaeologist friends. They stop digging then too. They'll dig from September to February, and then it's too bloody hot to be standing in a field. So if you're there and you're an archaeologist digging, then you know you're in the right time. If the place is closed down, get back to the hotel and have a drink.
Excellent. Anything else we need to know in terms of logistics of managing Cairo?
Again, I think I said Ubers make it easy to get
Yep.
around. Ask around for guides. I didn't give any because I mentioned up top that they just change
Yep.
so often. But it is good to get a guide. Like Saqqara, it'd be great to get a guide. If you want to go to Dashur, which is another site I didn't talk about, another pyramid's just below Saqqara, you need a car to get around. It's much better for somebody else to drive. Do not rent a car on your own in Egypt. It's like India or other
Gosh.
places. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Hire someone to do that. And you can find good prices. Again, you go into a tourist hotel and ask, they'll recommend some good guides. You'll need a visa to get there, so don't show up. You could queue up when you get there at Cairo Airport and get a visa, 60 US, but it'll slow you down. It could be a 2 hour wait. So you go online
Ah,
before you fly and you get it instantly once your $60 clears. So I would say do your planning and get your tourist visa before you land.
okay. I think
And then
that's
also
changed
too,
then from my trip, so that's good to know.
yeah, it changes a lot, I think. And again, if you go through any kind of tour agency or you talk to anybody in advance, they can do that all for you. Keep in mind, $62, I think, right now to get a visa. But yet, when you get there and you get a car on the Egyptian pound, and you go all the way to Cairo, it's like $5. So you can see this as an inflated price for them to make a little money.
Yeah.
But hey, it gives you the gift of Egypt, so it's worth it.
Yeah. And I have often, when people ask me my top places to travel, Egypt has made my top 3 country list, I'd say at least half the time, just
It's
depending on my
fantastic.
mood.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough place for some people. They don't like the heat. Women travelers alone should be a little cautious merely because the men are not dangerous, but they'll be aggressive and they'll try to intimidate you to buy something. And if you don't like all that sort of toxic masculinity in your face, it might be intimidating. So traveling in a group is good. Solo female traveler, I would say, particularly when you go down south. Cairo is a little different because it's much more modern. But you
Yeah.
might want to tag along with somebody else and give and insulate yourself a bit. Yeah, it is not like going to Martha's Vineyard for a week. It is definitely a different beast. But if you got the adventurous spirit, I can't recommend it highly enough.
A little more history than Martha's Vineyard, though, too.
Just a tad,
Just a
right?
tad, just a tad. As we get to some of our wrap up questions, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Cairo. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
It would be Zamalek. Zamalek is beautiful
Interesting.
because again, you got these lush trees. It's very well maintained, and you got some really old buildings, and it's just very livable and walkable. So it's a place that you can exhale in a way that sometimes you can't in Tahrir Square.
Interesting. I think I probably would have been up at the Muhammad Ali Mosque there at the Citadel with the views of the city.
That is
You know.
gorgeous too. And I forgot to mention, I haven't been to one, but I just talked to an Egyptian friend a few days ago, and he said they just started these concerts up there. Where at nighttime
Oh,
they're opening
wow.
the Citadel for jazz festivals. He just went to a Palestinian jazz band up there, and it sounds great. So you can get up there at the evening, overlooking that view of Cairo. On a clear day, you can see the pyramids from the Citadel, and at nighttime they have the music playing. And you sit there, and you can't drink alcohol. They won't give you alcohol because it's a mosque, but you can get some lovely tea, and you can spend the evening just listening to music at the very top of Cairo.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Cairo.
Oh, the traffic. The last time I went with, first time with my husband, who had never been there before, and he's been to some rough and tumble places with me. Crossing the street is exhausting. You never know when to go. You have to just like a game of Frogger. And it's like, I just followed it. I just took a breath and went and looked back, and my poor husband was on the other side for the 15 minutes having a meltdown because every time he put his foot out, he's sure someone's going to hit him. It is absolutely insane, the traffic. It is probably the worst I've seen, even worse than India, I think. They ignore traffic signs. Sometimes they're totally broken. Now you have the scooters everywhere. There is no rhyme or reason for it. Somehow it all flows to an Egyptian. But boy, forget about hiring a car. I would never say that is definitely a death wish. Just crossing the street is terrifying for a newcomer. So gird your loins for that.
And then when I was there, you had to throw in the occasional donkey cart or something like that that was also in the traffic.
Yes, oh, they're still there, particularly in Islamic Cairo. You'll still get
Yeah.
that, right? Or yeah, a goat will just run out in front of you, being chased by a young boy. You're trying to chase it down. Meanwhile, you got 16 city buses coming at you.
Yeah, I remember closing my eyes a few times in
Yeah, and
cabs.
it somehow works. Again, what you do is you wait for a local to cross and you follow them. You stay close
Yep,
to them.
exactly.
You
Exactly.
don't wait for the traffic to thin because it never thins.
And if you had to summarize Cairo in just 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
Controlled insanity. That's only 2 words. It is a wonderful transporting place, but it is otherworldly too.
Well,
You
if you
will,
want to,
again,
you can bank 1 word so that next time you come on, you can get 4.
okay, all right. Take the editing. Take the best descriptors from what I just said, and that'll be my answer.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Neil Laird from neillaird.com and also the Primetime Travelers series of books. Neil, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Cairo.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
A special thanks to the patrons of this show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in learning more about how to become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. And speaking of patrons of the show, a special thanks to Glenn Howarth, who just became a patron of the show. Thanks, Glenn. I heard this week from Todd, who said, just wanted to let you know that, inspired by episode 742, I walked across England along Hadrian's Wall in late July. Highly recommend if you get the chance. I just re-listened to that episode and I agree with most everything your guest said. My one nitpick would be that she undersold Carlisle. It may be my lack of experience with European travel, but both the castle and cathedral were well worth a visit, and the city itself seemed to be on the rise. I did not take your advice and walked from east to west. I did enjoy that, as the least interesting part was the beginning, walking through Newcastle. Despite mostly good weather, my decision did lead to dealing with some horizontal rain and trying to walk into 60-mile-an-hour headwinds. All in all, a great trip, and I hope you get to try it. I used Mac Adventures to handle bookings and portage of my luggage. Thanks for the inspiration, Todd. Thanks, Todd. Always great to hear. And it's funny because as I wrote to Todd, that episode came up in a conversation just the day before for me as I was on a trip here, and we talked about long-term hikes and what I would want to do. New on the Amateur Traveler since the last time a show went up is weekend trips from Amsterdam to Utrecht and Akmar, a blog post about my trip biking around Lake Constance, a journey through history, culture, and scenery, and then a Libya travel guide, architecture, culture, and adventure. Check those out at amateurtraveler.com. And speaking of my travels, if you're interested in traveling with me next May, that is 2026, we have a trip coming up to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, and I hope you can join us. You can learn more at amateurtraveler.com/trips, or just drop me an email and I'll tell you more. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.